Welcome to the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast powered by Hiscox. I'm your host, Sanjay Parekh. Throughout my career, I've had side hustles, some of which have turned into real businesses. But first and foremost, I'm a serial technology entrepreneur. In the creator space, we hear plenty of advice on how to hustle harder and why you can sleep when you're dead. On this show, we ask new questions in hopes of getting new answers. Questions like, how can small businesses work smarter? How do you achieve balance between work and family? How can we redefine success in our businesses so that we don't burn out after year 3? Every week, I sit down with business founders at various stages of their side hustle to small business journey. These entrepreneurs are pushing the envelope while keeping their values. Keep listening for conversation, context, and camaraderie. Today's guests are Kate Wallace and Blake Chasen from Delray Beach, Florida. Blake and Kate are the founders of Avenue Stories, an AI storytelling platform for children. This is their third business together, so we're super excited to chat with them today. Kate and Blake, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
So I'm excited to have you all on because not often do we have tech entrepreneurs on the show. And given my background as a tech entrepreneur, I feel like we're going to get into all kinds of fun stuff here. But before we get into that, give us a little bit about both of your backgrounds and what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, definitely. I can go first. So I'm from Toronto originally and moved to New York maybe about 12 years ago now. I started working in tech startups. The first one was Better Mortgage, which is actually where I met Blake. And then I went to Peloton after that, where Blake also came with me. And then after Peloton, we started Avenue Stories. And somewhere along the way, we started dating and got married. So we have a long working history together as well as a personal relationship.
Okay, so he stalked you all the way to Peloton, and then only after that did you guys start dating. I got it. Okay.
We've decided to come on this show today to tell that twisted story. Yeah, you're totally right.
So the Side Hustle, the Small Business podcast is now becoming the twisted dating story. Okay, got it.
That's right. Yeah, Side Hustle, the small business to marriage.
There you go. I love it.
They joked at Peloton actually when we both got there that we must have like negotiated as a package deal, and so these days obviously we are. I am not originally Canadian. I'm from the States, born outside of DC. Moved quite a lot though. I went to boarding school in New Hampshire. I did college in Pittsburgh, and then ultimately ended up in New York because even though Kate and I didn't know each other, we had both gotten really similar advice, which sort of led us to this small startup in New York, which was that. If you want to work in startups, the best thing to do is to join one right away to sort of see what everything's like, as opposed to sort of like trying to get into like big tech and then ultimately get smaller. And so, we joined Better, and maybe there was 25, 30 people there at the time, a lot of like young people. And so we built friendships with tons of people there. And lucky for me, I met Kate because I found not only a co-founder, but a life partner.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the advice you got there is absolutely right. It's so hard when you join a big tech company then to let go of all of those trappings that you get with big tech and then try to do a startup. I've seen that tried by so many people, and it's just so hard to do. It's not impossible, of course, but I think a lot of times you get comfortable, and that's not what you need as an entrepreneur, right? You need to be totally okay with not having enough ever. In your personal life, in your business life, everything. So, so tell me a little bit about the story of what got you to start this first thing then together.
Yeah, it's a great question. We people joke that like our first date, like me and Kate was basically just like in a conference room, talking like first about work at our jobs, and then ultimately like. We really liked working together. I sort of was in product management early in my career. Kate like began her career as a designer. And so anyone who sort of knows about tech startups and companies knows that like the PM and the designer are working incredibly closely together. And when you spend so much time with someone, especially when you're both like really focused on like, enjoying like the process of building something, naturally, like you end up talking about what could we build? What other things could we do? And so really like the focus of this podcast, like Side Hustle to Small Business, is really app because we were almost instantly talking about starting side hustles and what could we try and all of these different types of things. And so this business is maybe like version 30 for us because we've tried a million different things: startup for law firms, or software for law firms, software for people selling CPG stuff on, the internet and all sorts of things, and eventually landed on Avenue Stories.
Yeah. Yeah. So since you've touched upon it, I feel like I need to ask. So you started dating then while you were working at Peloton, is that right?
It's a funny story. So we met at Better Mortgage in New York, where we worked really closely together. Blake was the product manager, I was the designer. And it actually didn't start off great. Our manager had this funny story at our wedding where he said the first day that we were on a team together, he had a one-on-one with both of us where we both complained about the other person. So he couldn't believe that he ended up at our wedding. But at Better, we ended up working really well together and started working on side projects together where we'd end our day at Better and then go to the Parsons Library, which is where I went to college, and start working on side projects and different ideas. But we weren't dating at the time. And then as soon as Blake quit Better, we started dating right after that. So I think we were just sort of waiting to not both be at the same company. And we didn't plan to go to the same company again, but Peloton had 2 roles open and they were both a good fit for us. And we interviewed and they hired both of us. So then we just started working together again with the same manager for another 5 years.
Yeah. So that's funny because where I was going was I wanted to ask like those typical sitcoms where do people start dating and then they have to, I think it was in The Office, right? You have to fill out the dating form or whatever. And I was wondering if you guys had to fill out like the official dating form.
It's you go for it, Kate.
Okay. Well, so I got the job at Peloton first, and I was there for maybe a month, and then another role opened, and Blake applied for it. And I was very transparent with my manager. I said, Blake is my boyfriend. We're together. He just thinking, okay, if he has a problem with it, then he won't hire Blake.
Right.
And he said, no, it's no problem. I really want Blake on the team. And we had assumed that he had cleared it with his manager or his manager's manager. And we just assumed everybody knew. But at work, we're really professional. Like you would have no idea that we're together. And then we got engaged and put it on Instagram. And everybody just freaked out because they had no idea that we were dating. But we had the entire time just assumed that everybody knew.
We were in basically like engineering, like an entire organization wide meeting with basically like the executive of our org, like giving a presentation on quarterly goals. And so we were talking about subscriber growth, and we were also talking about engagement, right? Like the metrics that you care about to sort of retain users. And he ends the meeting by saying, speaking of engagement, like Blake and Kate just got engaged. And another coworker who we like obviously thought knew about this, because if we had sort of expressed it to our manager, like there would have been no way this other person would not have known. He like spits out his water and goes, to each other. And so, yeah. And the funny thing about, starting Avenue is everybody, who we interview and folks who have joined the team, like they obviously know that we're married, but it is true. Like we're really, I mean, when you're at work, like you've got a job to do. We're in the same house now, but obviously we're here, like not talking through the same mic. We take Zooms from our own laptops in different rooms. Like, especially when you work remote, you don't see a lot of it. Right. And so it can be funny for folks when they do find out that actually we have a personal relationship too, outside of just starting the company together.
Well, let me ask you about that because this is kind of jumping forward a little bit for me, but I'm interested in this because of experiences that I had too, where I had, in my first startup, I had 2 team members who were siblings, brothers. And that actually was the reason why I had at least one particular VC that would not fund us because of they didn't fund teams where there were family relationships. Have you found any friction or issues either in terms of investors or in terms of employees that you're trying to bring on, or partners or anything else like that, that look at this and be like, no, this is something we just don't do?
I think because we have this interesting history of having worked together for so long, I think it de-risks it a lot. I think people look at that and say, okay, they've sort of been through this before and it clearly works for them. So I think that has been one thing that's really helped us overcome it. And then I think the second thing is just when you have a lot of traction and something exciting happening, people are excited to be a part of it. So even if there's some risk, it sort of outweighs the risk.
Right. I think there's a number of very high-flying tech startups like Stripe that are started by two brothers that it's like, well, how would you not want to be a part of that, right? Like that's a lot of potential value to walk away from.
Totally.
So okay, so you guys are working through these ideas and everything. What gets you to this idea, and what excites you about this idea?
Yeah, it's a great question, because what got us to this idea was basically not giving up, but being a little fed up with the process of trying to start businesses. And so it's like 2020, we're sort of right in the middle of COVID. We've now been like relegated to our 1-bedroom apartment in New York, like hardly leaving it, trying to do all this stuff on the internet. And I looked at Kate at one point and I was like, look, I have to take a break. Like I feel like I'm burning out. We really wanted to start something. We've always been entrepreneurial. And it's funny, right? Like I said, we both came to New York to join startups. We went to a second startup, and then that startup Peloton got really big. And so we had almost like grown, which was very exciting, but we had grown into this environment that like we were not suited for, or we didn't really want to be in, right? Like all of a sudden our jobs were building decks more than they were like making, the products that we like to make. And so I told Kate I needed to take a break. And I'm a creative writer, actually. Like my background is creative writing. I studied it. Growing up, I wanted to be a fiction writer. And so I told Kate I was just going to look for a creative outlet as opposed to more of like an entrepreneurial one. I bought an NFT. It was the first NFT I'd ever bought. I wasn't really in the like crypto space or anything like that. Right. But I thought, oh, there are these interesting communities of people that are sort of coming around these like NFT characters. I'm going to buy one and I'm going to start writing sort of on behalf of the character, because it just felt like a fun hobby, felt like something that was obviously not a business. And I started writing as this character and on Twitter, basically posting threads and things like that. And the character just like totally blew up. Anyone who had an NFT avatar started following my character. They started sending me requests to write about their characters. At the time, the market was really hot. A lot of people were participating. So there were all these new people who had these like sort of creative like assets, if you will, but didn't really know what to do with them. They were like collecting them like they were trading cards, but the trading card was just a picture. There was no other sort of content about it.
Right.
And, we're software people. And so as soon as this like audience and community started being built around creating characters and generating stories with them, we looked at each other and we were like, well, maybe we just backed into something we could do. What kind of platform can we build around this that can enable people to like also engage in sort of creativity and creative acts as a hobby?
Yeah. So, okay. So you kind of, like a lot of great stories, accidentally found kind of this niche, but you've pivoted away from like dealing with NFTs. So why did that happen? And what kind of motivated you to make this pivot into now this new thing?
So we had this software product that was for storytelling in the NFT space, and then the NFT market collapsed, and we had to really look at what we were doing and say, okay, what comes next here? And what we realized was that the people who were using our product weren't there for the NFTs. They were there because we had just created this unique way to create stories. And what we realized was people just really love to be creative and build things. And when you give them tools that make that easy and you let them do it as a part of a community, and it's a very sticky product. So we took that and said, okay, let's just take out the NFT business model and just focus on building out the software. And then as we continue to build the ability for people to build stories, the stories that by far were the most successful were the ones that people were building for kids. So we started reaching out to those users to understand what was going on there. And they said, my kids love these stories. Like every single night, my my daughter is asking for an Avenue story. And I think that was for a few reasons. One is kids get really into specific topics. Like you'll have a kid that this week is obsessed with turtles and they only want to be called turtle and they dress like a turtle and they only want to read books about turtles. So all of a sudden on our product, you could have 1,000 stories about turtles. And then the other thing that Avenue Stories does is it lets you build a character that you can put into the stories. So what people are doing is they're building their kids, and now every story features the kid. And kids get so excited when they see themselves in the pictures or they can hear their own name. So this idea of pairing their favorite topic with stories about themselves is very compelling. And then we dove headfirst into kids' content.
Yeah, interesting. That's fascinating. Okay, so let's talk about how the business actually operates then with you two. You, Blake, before you said, you're the product manager and Kate, you're the kind of designer. And, I'm trying to understand like what's the Venn diagram here, and how much of an overlap is there in the business, and how do you guys deal with that overlap?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost in the transition from working at a company to starting our own, a baseball analogy comes to mind where we sort of shifted the infield, where I moved from product to business and Kate moved from design to product. And Kate had actually moved into product management even before when we were working at our startups, but she just comes from a design background. And so it makes a lot of sense for Kate to have ownership over like product development. And I guess I got the short end of the stick. I'm not as good at product as Kate is. And so what does that leave me with? It leaves me with trying to grow it, right? And partnerships and marketing and the content too, right? Because my background is creative writing. Kate really is the one who identified this. Early on, we tried to set really firm boundaries about our areas of ownership, because both of us, we like to have autonomy. We wanted to avoid falling into the trap of like decisions by committee and things like that. But it also created this funny like friction that I think does not only exist for married couples who work together, but actually for any sort of partnership, which is that sort of the point of working together in a small group to build something is like work together. And so as time has gone on, we've become a lot more open to collaborating with each other in our areas. In fact, in our app, there's a library of content that you can pick right away to sort of get inspiration, and then you can generate content featuring a character that you've made about any topic that you like. And Kate is responsible for probably most of the content that exists in the library now anyway, because as a product person, she knows the content that will sort of integrate best into the app anyway. So as time has gone on, we've definitely gotten more comfortable sort of flowing between each other's areas.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you talked about those boundaries. Like how often then are you kind of flowing into each other's areas then? And is there friction when it does happen?
I think it works really well for us to be flowing in and out sort of on almost a daily basis. And I think the reason for that is I really have a like deep respect for Blake's opinion, and I know he feels the same way. So just to use a real example, I wrote a whole document of our product roadmap for the next 6 weeks. I included the data for why I thought this was what we should be doing. I was ready to present it to the engineering and design team to have everybody sort of move in that direction. And then Blake looked at it and made this point, which was that this metric was off with our onboarding, and we actually had tremendous drop off early on in the app, which makes our like acquisition less efficient. And it completely changed the plan. And at first I thought, I just did all this work and now I have to change it. Then I was also like, okay, he's totally right. I missed this. And thank goodness it's nice to have somebody who is looking at it just with a fresh perspective. And I think it works both ways. Like, I think we make each other better. And there's not, even if there's an immediate resistance, because you're like, oh, I worked hard on this thing. Then you realize, okay, I respect this person's opinion and we all just want what's best for the company.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times as entrepreneurs, those times when you fail and you realize you did the wrong thing, there's still opportunities to learn, right? You probably learned so much in that process anyways, that it's going to come, if it didn't come back around immediately, it's going to come back around at some point down the line, and you're going to be able to use that.
100%. I mean, we have failed probably, if not 100 times, like 1,000 times more in this business than we ever had in our careers. Because a career outside of the sort of risk it takes to be an entrepreneur has a whole bunch of sort of safety like built into it. It's actually very hard to fail when you're working within like a more constrained environment. And it's hard, but you know, even if we weren't in a relationship, Kate is the person I'd want to start a business with because she's her skill set and her temperament and all these things about her is really great. It's a bonus, right, that we also ended up married with each other. But I think the decision to work together and the openness to go into each other's areas comes from the foundation of of working together. Although I will say it is way better to be the guy who's right than to have the other person come into your area and tell you actually that you missed a key metric.
And I think you kind of touched upon something I think that really defines the difference between good entrepreneurs and like everybody else is that we are willing to fail. And we're willing to be okay with those 1,000 times that we're going to fail and it's going to be a disaster. And we're just going to continue to pick ourselves up and move forward from there. So I want to ask you a question because you guys have a particular complication to deal with in this and that's how do you keep balance between your personal lives and your professional lives? Because you're working together every day, all the time. You're on calls like this with other folks together. Like, how do you balance that? And how do you make sure that work doesn't bleed into all of the rest of life? Or is that okay? Do you let that happen and it's okay with you?
Yeah, I think early on, we tried to set really firm boundaries with work and life where we wouldn't talk about work in the evenings or we would only Slack each other about work. We wouldn't text each other. And I think it didn't really work for us because we love our work. Like we love what we do, which is we're really fortunate to feel like that. But it makes us want to pause the movie and talk for 30 minutes about our growth acquisition strategy and then go back to the movie. But I think the two things that have really helped us have a sense of balance in our life is prioritizing fitness. I mean, we work out every morning except for Saturdays when we go for breakfast instead. And then also prioritizing time with family is really important to us, whether it's our extended family or siblings, just really making that a priority.
Okay, so I got to ask, so the workout 6 days a week, which is phenomenal. Do you do it together? Is there a competitive streak? Like how do you run that?
That we do separately.
Okay.
We go to the same gym, but different workout routine for sure.
Okay. I was trying to understand how deep the competition goes.
For sure. No, there's some things have to be separate. There's a point that occurs though about 40 minutes into the workout where typically I'm about ready to give up. And so I text Kate and I say, how many sets do you have left? But besides that text message, we're that's the alone time I think we have.
Yeah. Okay. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about fundraising, because you guys are in a type of business where you have raised money. Talk to us a little bit about that, what that process was like, the challenges and opportunities for you, and kind of how do you move forward from where you are today?
Yeah, totally. Fundraising and bringing sort of outside capital and outside partners into the business was exciting, definitely like an accelerator. But I think also, comes with a unique set of challenges. And this would be my advice, I think, for anyone who's going out and thinking about raising money for their business is especially the first time you go out to raise outside capital, not focusing on the fundraise is really key. That actually went really well for us. We were focused on our users and on creating like really positive interaction for those users. And coincidentally, or sort of without really focusing on it, what ended up happening was there was sort of this loud community of users that were on the internet that were sharing what they were doing. And so it created like some organic and positive momentum. And what that did is ultimately, I think it attracted some people to come to us and want to poke around what we were doing, check out what we were doing, better understand what we were doing. And so actually the first meeting that we ever took with our lead investor, which is Andreessen Horowitz, we showed up without a deck. And I now understand that that was like a power move. But at the time, we were just focused on our users. And so there's this one call that's on our calendar that day, and it's not related to, building something or talking to our users. And so we came for when the meeting started, chatted, and then left. And I think that inadvertently, what was happening with our users being really excited about what we were making, and with us being really focused on what we were making and having some really like good and organic growth and some momentum, brought people to us because they felt like what we were doing was something that was really worth like at least digging into, right? And so that's how we got the first conversation and the second conversation and things like that. Kate and I are not we're not sort of natural. I don't know. It's funny to say this. If you've met us in real life, like we're not like big braggers or boasters or things like that. But I think one thing we've learned is that you sort of have to have this internet version of yourself when you're working on a business that is really proud to share everything that you're doing. Because if you have a lot of great stuff going on and nobody knows about it, then you don't have an opportunity to bring any like interesting partners in. But if you've got great stuff going on and you're willing to tell people about it, then you can create an environment where people sort of want to raise their hand and say, hey, like, how can I get involved? Or is there an opportunity to get involved? Or how can I be helpful and stuff like that?
Yeah. I think you touch upon something that I talk about a lot, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this. A lot of entrepreneurs don't want to talk about what they're working on because they're afraid that somebody's going to steal their idea, right? That it's so delicate and precious that just by telling somebody else, the market's going to be gone. And my approach to all that has always been like, I tell everybody everything that I'm working on because I would love for them to tell me why I'm being an idiot and this is not a good idea so that I can move on to the next idea, which maybe will be a good idea. But it sounds like you're in that same approach of you like to tell everybody about what you're doing. Like, and why do you think that way?
Yeah, I think same reason that you just said. It's great to get feedback quickly. The other thing is, and when I was younger, like I'm thinking high school, college, wanting to start little projects, I was really protective over the idea.
Right.
The thing is, implementing an idea is so much harder. And so you can get a lot of the benefits of sharing your idea without really needing to be nervous. One, because everyone you talk to has their own thing they're focused on. Even if they're not entrepreneurs, they're focused on their own families, their careers, what their hobbies, anything like that. They don't really have the time to take your idea anyway. But if I tell you what Avenue is, which is this ability to come onto our app, to create a character, whether it's your kid, yourself, a pet, a robot, a unicorn, and then to generate custom content that features that character, it might sound simple. The amount of work that we have done behind the scenes to structure the data properly, to make sure that you show up correctly and consistently in imagery, to make sure the stories have a correct arc, to be able to do fairy tales and adventures and action and romance and horror and all of this type of content, it's not easy. The idea sort of sounds simple. The implementation is much harder. Yeah. And so ultimately, like you've got an idea because you found something that is resonating with you, probably because of some prior experience that you have. So you're thinking about the implementation. The people you tell your idea to, though, aren't thinking about step 12. And so I don't think you really have to worry about it that much.
Yeah. Kate, what do you think? Same or is there any other wrinkle to that?
Yeah, and I think the other thing is just opportunities come when you're out talking about what you're doing, because you never know who might be in the space or know somebody who's in the space, or even just have kids who want to try it out. So when you go and talk about it, then good things can come your way.
Yeah, I 100% agree, right? Nobody's going to be able to help you if they don't know you exist. And unless you talk about it, they don't know you exist. So, okay, one last question I have, because I think this is probably in the last couple of years exploded everywhere. It's exploded for you guys. Talk about AI and just kind of what you see as the opportunities, the threats, all of that. I think, there's a lot of other entrepreneurs that are trying to leverage AI for helping their businesses out and being able to do things. Obviously, your whole business is centered around leveraging this. What do you see in terms of that for yourselves, for the business kind of moving forward, and where are you concerned about the future?
I think the opportunity with AI and content is hyper-personalization. So now you can create a story about your kid and their best friend, and it can be about how they met a unicorn that plays hockey because your daughter loves unicorn and her friend loves hockey. And you can create that story in under a minute. I mean, that is incredible. Like, we've never been able to do that before. And it was a game changer for our product, for sure. And I think we'll see more and more of that even outside of kids and storytelling. I think social media and everything will just start to become more hyper-personalized to what people are interested in. And then I think the risk is being able to keep the human creativity element. It would be really sad for everything to sort of start to feel the same. So that's something else that we think a lot about, is how do you make sure that these stories are created by AI, but that people are able to have enough input into it where each story feels unique and different and has the creativity of a person behind it. Like, if it was completely generated by AI and only AI, it feels a little hollow. But when you pair AI with the creativity of a person, or even better, the creativity of a kid, because their imaginations are limitless, I think that's when you create something really special.
Yeah, I love that. I lied. I've got one actually last question for both of you.
Yeah.
If you were talking to somebody who's thinking about doing what you guys did, not dating a coworker, I'm talking about starting a business, and launching a side hustle, or taking that side hustle and making it a full-time business, what would that advice be for that person?
Yeah. I think that the most important thing to do first is build an audience, and I understand that you might hear that from a lot of different places today, and so it could seem like somewhat either cliche or generic. But to build a successful business, you need to serve your users and your customers, and your users and customers are going to have something in common. And I used to think to myself, oh, I'm not a good enough software engineer to build something great. If I could just code it really well, I'd build it and then I'd be successful. And I think ultimately what I feel like we've learned in this is that making sure you've found your market first and understood the problems or the opportunity that exists with a type of person is really, really valuable. Because once you build that, you've got a platform from which you can actually sort of launch something. And so everything that we, have with Avenue was born out of writing this character that encouraged a whole bunch of other people to start writing their own characters. And it was like the little teeny version of the snowball that started to roll. And it happened by accident for us. But the next business we start will be incredibly intentional with building the community first and then launching into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Kate and Blake, this has been fantastic. Where can our listeners find and connect with y'all online?
Yeah, so we have a few channels. The first is our YouTube channel, Avenue Stories, where you can listen to different stories that were created on our platform. We also have an Instagram and a TikTok, also as Avenue Stories. And then our website is avenuestories.co.
I have one more. You can find us in the App Store and Play Store by searching Avenue Stories.
Love it. Love it. Kate and Blake, thanks so much for being on today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast, powered by Hiscox. To learn more about how Hiscox can help protect your small business through intelligent insurance solutions, visit hiscox.com. And to hear more Side Hustle to Small Business stories or share your own story, visit hiscox.com/side hustle to small business. I'm your host, Sanjay Parekh. You can find more about me at my website, sanjayparekh.com.